Hey, thanks everyone for listening and watching, sharing with your family and friends, and don't forget to subscribe. Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing is brought to you by Travelopod. For destinations like Africa, Japan, Antarctica, India, and the Northern Lights regions, start your journey with Travelopod. Visit vacation.travelopod.com.
I can say that I have ways of thinking about what I'm doing, ways of coming to grips with what's happening, and a lot of that is informed by a history of other people coming to grips with what's happening. There's a history of ideas that's inside of what I do.
Is the reverence that you have for that transductive experience, is that a personal proxy to kind of express both the sentiments of divergence and conflict and storminess, along with the harmony that eventually happens for people who say, yes, I want more?
Sometimes people say to me, why do you do all these different things? And actually, to me, it's all the same thing. I'm in this band one day and in another band the next day. It feels like the same. Maybe the ingredients are different, but the methods and the human touch is the same. Hello, this is Vijay Iyer. I'm a composer and pianist, and this is Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Yeah. My name is Abhay Dandekar, and I share conversations with talented and interesting individuals linked to the global Indian and South Asian community. It's informal and informative, adding insights to our evolving cultural expressions, where each person can proudly say, trust me, I know what I'm doing. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. I've been reflecting a lot on how art in general has been simply such a magnificent expander and accelerator for me to think differently and to explore things with a lot of purpose, with intention, with joy, with the beauty of all of life's imperfections, and with just simply a longing for more. And so with that in mind, I am definitely ready to welcome one of my favorite artists, award-winning musician, composer, and piano artist, Vijay Iyer. He's been described by the New York Times as a social conscience, multimedia collaborator, system builder, rhapsodist, historical thinker, and multicultural gateway. His honors include a MacArthur Fellowship, a Doris Duke Performing Artist Award, the United States Artist Fellowship, and 3 Grammy nominations, not to mention being a Harvard professor and a mentor to so many aspiring musicians and artists. I am deeply, deeply thrilled and honored to welcome him to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Vijay, it's so great to have you here and to catch up with you.
Thanks so much. Happy to be a part of it.
Around this time of year, we were just talking about the academic calendar and the semester being in full swing and that kind of thing. Whether they are incremental improvements to ourselves, to our health, to our body, you find yourself that you have daily routines or rituals that really help, in fact, energize or restore the creative process, or for that matter, just you as an artist. Hey, I get up every morning and this is my routine, or this is my practice ritual, etc.
I wish I could say there was an every morning type of thing, but I think the nature of my life has been such that every day is kind of different from the day before. And not just different in content, but different in structure. Like I end up in a different place and have to be in a different place at a different time, and have to, so that, and then in a different time zone and whatever else. And so everything, it's very hard to maintain any kind of continuity through all that. So I think what I end up doing is just trying to protect every bit of time that I have, even to allow myself time to not do anything,
Yeah.
I think that's the hardest line to hold, I would say, because there's so many ways that our time gets colonized.
Yeah, no, that's a great word to use there, where our time does get colonized. And maybe I wonder for you, is that ability to protect that space, is that ability to embrace the differences of each day, and is that itself kind of an important anchor for you?
So it's kind of like, what can you hold on to that's constant through all those shifts? And in a way, just reminding myself of that, of my own continuity. There's also, I think, like part of our time being colonized is our memory being colonized and kind of there's a sort of like cycle of amnesia or erasure that happens partly because we're so flooded with information and we can't really hold on to much of it. And it's hard to make any information matter. So often just reminding myself of who and what I am. I think that, partly because I'm a piano player, there's the piano over there, that a lot of the work I do is in my body. It's not just on a screen.
Right.
It's
Right.
not email. It's not just showing as a sort of office guy. It's really like putting my body through some experience, physical and emotional experience. And that requires a bit of attention and care. Like I said, like trying to take better care of the body. And I find that, just having space, particularly in the early part of the day, to devote to that, even if it's a few minutes to lay my hands on it,
Hmm.
experience that communion with something outside myself, and experience that sensory bodily connection between what I'm doing and what I'm feeling and hearing. That grounds me in something other than all these, I don't know, the cognitive violence of today.
Yeah, boy, there's another great way to put that. The cognitive violence of today. So true. I had the pleasure of watching you perform a few months ago now, and I was so struck by how humble and gentle your vibe was when I met you, and contrast that with how I felt, of course, after listening to your performance and of course watching you perform. And I was struck with how that gentle nature, that vibe that you exude, I was struck with how contrasting that was, is at least how I felt, from how immensely powerful and driving your music was. At least, again, to the relatively novice listener like me, I'm curious if this is something that has evolved at all over the years with the intention of what you just mentioned a moment ago, which is like, having that communion with the instrument, making sure that you're sort of stepping both into it and away from it at the same time. And I'm curious if you've been very, very mindful of that evolution over time. Or, by the way, if that's completely off base, let me know too.
Thank you for that. That's there's very kind words buried within that question. I think life is humbling, and so whatever you're calling humility comes from just experiencing sort of a broad spectrum of human experience and possibility, and the highs and lows of living a life in the arts, being a parent, being a teacher, being an artist on the road. There's a Some of it is squalor, and some of it
Mm.
is ecstatic grandeur, so being able to hold all of that and hold on, like what I was saying earlier about sort of holding on to, some sense of myself across it all and through it all, that consistency. And I guess the other thing is I've just been around so many incredible artists, incredible musicians, people who are celebrated and people who aren't, but people who can play circles around me, people who have taught me so much, people younger than me, people decades older than me. And through that collaborative practice, like through just being in the world among others as an artist, among other artists, and then also through the experience of trying to make contact with audiences, that you take nothing for granted and you understand that you're just a small piece of it all, that you're not the answer to everything. You're not, I mean, I find that any sort of self-aggrandizing idea can quickly get kind of put in check or kept in balance by something else that happens the same day, usually, like getting
It's
yelled at by some security guard or so, like,
right.
or being, I think like we can easily get full of ourselves when we receive adulation and praise and awards, but, life has usually offers a bit more perspective on what that might mean, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's that, and then I guess the other thing I want to say is that making music is partly about channeling all the impulses and, everything that courses through you and focusing it into this very directed action, that's very, like, specific and kind of minute, like, I'm just sitting at this instrument, and moving my hands around, and why should that somehow result in somebody else across the room feeling something, you know? It's, or, like, why should someone who's blowing into a tube make you cry? Like, what is
Right. Right.
this kind of, transduction that's happening, I think is the word. You're harnessing something that's maybe very essential to you, or maybe you're reaching for something, but you're also trying to get it across. And so being able to explore the full range of that, express the full range of it, which means that there'll be moments that are tender and other moments that are brutal,
Yeah.
and
Of
that
course.
can be in the same few seconds, And so, like, being able to traverse that kind of range is part of the art, I
Yeah.
think. And it's something that I listen for in others.
I'm thinking of that transduction, of course, that you have when you're actually doing this alone and you're having this kind of conversation with an instrument, with your audience, with the listeners. And we were just sharing that you were performing solo, and it's a little bit different energy and expression. As opposed to collaboration and the reverence that you have. I mean, you've worked with sort of a who's who of musicians and artists, and reverence for collaboration and conversation. Is the reverence that you have for that transductive experience, is that a personal proxy to kind of express both the sentiments of divergence and conflict and, like you said, sort of storminess with this, along with the harmony that eventually happens for people who say, yes, I want more of that? Is your ability to flow between kind of the solo performance and the collaboration, is that something that you really appreciate? Is that something you crave for that matter?
Yeah, I mean, I think in every case, there is some kind of encounter happening. A solo concert is not me sitting in a room by myself, right? It's me actually trying to make a room full of people feel something or help them arrive at some space of feeling, or so it's a very communicative form. I'm trying to tell you something. I'm trying to carry you somewhere. I'm trying to be the vessel for all of us to feel something together.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's never a solo is never solo, in that sense. It's really like, uh, there's I'm trying to tap into the feeling of the room, of the people in the room, not to pander to them or something, but to really make sure that we're moving together. I'm not trying to leave someone behind. I'm not trying to, show off for them. I'm not trying to make myself look good, actually. I'm not trying to do that. That's not the point. I'm trying to accomplish something where we all feel something together, and then that space of shared feeling is, the key to it all. It sort of maybe reveals that there's something more we can do together. I mean, collaborating with other musicians is about imagining what it is that we can do together, and that essential question, that sort of lifelong question for me, is both a practical question and it's many things. It's not just two things. It's a practical question.
Yeah.
It's
It's quite
also
layered.
it's also a philosophical question, and it's an emotional question, a spiritual question. It's because part of what's in there is the question of who do we mean by we? Who are the we who are doing something together, and what does that we mean? Who's not in the mix? Who's not in the picture? Whom does this enterprise exclude, and why?
Has that sentiment or that question of like, who's the we, eliminating those boundaries among the people either on stage or in an audience, or for that matter, who aren't even in that? that concert hall. Is answering that question part of a lifelong artistic philosophy? Do you have a philosophy that's been shaped by answering that question?
I am hesitant to say yes only because I'd have to follow up with some explanation, but
Right.
I would I'm not sure what philosophy is, to be honest, and I'm not saying that facetiously. I mean, as who's in the arts and humanities at Harvard, and there's a philosophy department, and I have friends like the dean of my division is a philosopher. Like, I know what philosophy is, but when we say, like, "Do you have a philosophy?" I don't know. I can say that I have ways of thinking about what I'm doing, or ways of understanding, I should say, not just thinking about in some mental sense, like this dispassionate, removed sense, but really ways of coming to grips with what's happening, you know? And a lot of that is informed by a history of other people coming to grips with what's happening. And so what I'd say is that there's a history of ideas that's inside of what I do, that I didn't come up with it by myself. I learned it from others who learned it from their forebears, you know? And so there is a certain, for example, belief that anyone can make music together. Not a belief, it's a truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can prove
Right.
it. I
Right.
feel like I have actually, uh, many times over. So I believe that, and I know it to be true, and I've witnessed it happening. I've been a part of it happening. And what that means is that we don't actually know what music is. We don't
Mm.
know the extent of it because it keeps opening up onto new vistas, into new territories. It keeps expanding as a category. And so when we say, music is whatever we can do together, for example, as a provocation at least, or as a sorta offer, then it keeps revealing more about itself.
When you think about that question of, discovery and do we actually know what music is? Do we know what this relationship is? And you have this kind of ongoing conversation with yourself, collaborators, audiences, etc. When you think about your role as an educator, what perhaps have you had to unlearn about yourself in order to find success as a teacher, as an educator?
Well, I often go back to what elders have shared with me and taught me. There was a composer and pianist named Muhal Richard Abrams who I got to know fairly well in the last 20 years of his life. He passed in 2017. I got to interview him in maybe 2012 or so for they didn't call them podcasts back then, but that's
Right.
basically
Just called them chats. I hope they did. I hope they still do.
archival interview something.
Right, right.
You know, one thing he said was, "You speak to 5 people after a concert, and every one of them says something different about what happened." And I said, "Yeah, that's right." And he said, "The purpose of music is to excite all these different experiences, which means that there's no one way to hear something or to understand something." So what that has, like, I think about that almost every day. I mean, it's been like 14 years since he told me that, but I bring it up all the time. I was just, last week, I'm teaching this bunch of undergraduates where I'm holding a course where we just explore the work of different composer pianists, and I told them that, like, I don't actually know everything there is to know here, and so we're gonna build knowledge together from what each of us experiences. We're gonna share it with each other and listen and learn from one another. But that spirit of learning from one another, and that I'm not the master, I remember Zakir Hussain saying something that his father said to him, which is that you can never be a master of something. You can only be an eternal student. So that sensibility, I think, is something I try to carry forward and share with everyone else. I mean, I was just, I've been listening to Thelonious Monk for 40 years, and I just came from teaching, or just sharing, holding this course. But I even am reluctant to use the word teaching because
Sure.
what we're doing is learning together. And I said, like, I listened again to this piece, this one piece that I've heard maybe thousands of times in 40 years, and I learned something new this morning about it.
Mm.
Class, when I was preparing for class. So it's also that every encounter with a piece of music is new.
Love that. I mean, those surprises, those aha moments, they can only come from having that sort of growth and learning mindset if you're just constantly a student. And it really does. I think that is something that we do continually grow into. Hi, friends. You may have visited Italy and seen all the highlights, but exploring Europe or Asia for a more immersive vacation is where the details truly matter. That's why so many trust Travelopod for personalized custom experiences. From small group travel to complex planning for any destination, the pros at Travelopod can help make your trip seamless, affordable, and unforgettable. With thousands of 5-star ratings and stress-free booking and support, Travelopod is your trusted partner for unforgettable experiences around the world. Visit vacation.travelopod.com. Hi, I'm Abhay Dandekar, and if you have an animal in your life that you love, then I want to introduce you to the Timber Dog RuffRest, the only dog bed you'll ever need. The patented RuffRest is compact and light with over 14 travel features, comes in 3 sizes, and has everything from storage for essentials to a built-in sleeping bag. The New York Times Wirecutter calls it a versatile, portable dog bed with lots of extras for traveling or camping. Go to timberdog.com to explore RuffRest, the only dog bed you'll ever need. I'm going to, of course, share. I'm a huge fan. I love so much of your work. I have an actual favorite. My favorite is your cover of Mystic Brew. And it's only because it captures so much contrast and motion and urgency with also so much peace and tranquility. And again, you're right. That's my takeaway from that. And I take something away every time I listen to it. And I noticed that this theme was present in many of your live performances as well, of creating different moods and using speed and shapes of how your music resonates, all within the confines of a sort of governed composition. And is there an element of mathematics or puzzle solving or storytelling that you use with intention in your performances in art?
There's a kind of if that ever is an element, it's always, as you suggest, in service to something else,
Mm,
more like you say, storytelling, or more of an emotional arc, or an, an a larger shape, right? Is something more felt than counted. So sometimes it's that in the micro details of what's happening, like that piece being a good example, where it's sort of like a specific idea is taken through a few different transformations,
hmm
where the internal kind of mechanism of it shifts, but it still somehow feels the same. And so that's what I was interested in, was that particular sensation of similarity, or familiarity, but also that the inner workings might kind of come to life in a different way, might start spinning faster internally or something. So that's basically what's happening, is these what I would call similarity relationships, which is not, it's a combination, I would say, of mathematics and feeling, in the sense that, what does similar mean? Similar doesn't mean anything
Yeah.
mathematically. I mean,
Yeah.
it does, I suppose, like there's some wavy lines and it means something geometrically. But when I say that this feels like that, you can't quantify that,
Right.
right? You can say
Right.
that they're similar, there's a similar proportion, maybe, but not the same, right? It's not just like I'm multiplying, you know, by 1.5 and getting 1.5x. Like, it's not that. It's something else that is, you can describe using numbers, but the numbers aren't doing it. The numbers aren't the reason for it. The feeling is the reason for it, and the numbers happen to be the means by which you get to that feeling. But as I often have to tell people, like, you measure all kinds of stuff all the time, like when you mix a drink or bake a cake or build a doorway, like you are counting, you're measuring, you're creating, like, proportions. It's not a big deal, right? This is like a grade school arithmetic, like, you learned it when you were 8, how to do this stuff. So I'm not doing anything that's, like, super, intellectual. I guess I'd put it that way. I will also say that some of what I'm talking about comes from checking out what percussionists from South Asia do. in different rhythmic traditions. I mean, I mentioned Zakir Hussain. I would also shout out, I don't know, Triti Shankaran and Umayalpuram Shivaraman and these different Carnatic percussionists. Then there's also the folk drummers from Kerala, and like, and of course, there's all this film music which works with similar elements. And sometimes there's something in there that I find interesting that I want to engage with. So a lot of, I don't know, should I say the first 20 years of my recorded output, now that there are more than 30 years, but,
I
a lot of it
think,
had this as an ingredient.
yeah, and I maybe I postulated that feeling from just knowing that you spent some time in Berkeley and thinking about mathematics, and yet at the same time you're so right, and I think about that a lot too. That like it goes beyond the arithmetic or the algebraic way that we may form, those constructs, because you can't quantify feeling as you mentioned.
Yeah, and I would say that the math I was doing in college and grad school is not the math that's involved in making music for the
Mm,
most part. Like, it's not, you know, not in this element, like this arithmetic stuff or like, "Oh, well, turns out that 8 is also 3 plus, you know, 2 plus 3." Like, so this kind of that's not like, um, that's not revelatory and it's not college math, alright? It's just something that a child could do, and so that's the kind of math I might involve. The only element that sometimes uses anything, like, more sophistic or more, like, advanced is thinking about sound, which then you're thinking about vibration, thinking about frequencies and frequency relationships, and that is involved in everything, whether it's creating a chord or orchestrating a piece for an ensemble or mixing an album or mastering an album, or even just playing in an ensemble. You have to kind of think about sonic relationships in this way, and it's helpful to have some working understanding of that, of the
of
physics.
course.
It's not that, that's all I'm thinking about, but it's helpful. It gives me a kind of I don't know.
Yeah, it gives you context. It gives you, yeah, helps set it up for sure.
This morning I was it's a room full of Harvard students, so I'm like, "Hey, let's talk about the harmonic series. It's actually gonna help us understand some of these chords." So I and I was showing them like, "Well, this is a prime number, and that matters in the harmonic series for this reason." So the
Mm,
stuff like that. I was
yeah,
able to tell them about that, like, so that's maybe like middle school math.
yeah, yeah. Can't escape those grades, right?
Yeah.
It's 2026, and we live in this, it is a very tumultuous place to organize art without being tied to the consciousness of the world right now. And many of your compositions feel so deeply tied to those social realities and that sort of zeitgeist and that consciousness. I mean, how do you translate current events or emotions into a musical form without it being overly didactic? Or for that matter, is that something you don't worry about too much?
I is what something I don't worry about, the didactic part, or I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, if it is didactic, so what?
Well, I think it's maybe more about how does politics function in music? And, I think I indicated earlier that the question of what is it that we can do together is a political question,
Mm,
right? It's a practical question in the sense of music making, like, well, I know how to do this and you know how to do that. So what can we do that kind of combines those two spheres of knowledge, let's say, or something? There's that. The larger political question of what can we do together is the same question. Well, I know this and you know that. So what can we do together and why? I guess it's for whom, for what, to what end, right? Uh, So then, like, making a piece that's like has a certain title that maybe points to something outside of itself, or like is kind of about says it's about something, right? Like, how does instrumental music come to be about something? Because I said so. Is that do enough? I mean, I can say with sincerity that, for example, the piece "Kite" for Rafat Arir, was a Palestinian poet who was killed in Gaza in a targeted killing in December of 2023. When I wrote that piece, I thought about him. Every time I play it, I think about him. And not just think about him as a kind of topic, but I feel something about him. I guess that's really what I mean. And so that space of feeling becomes a space that I wanna share with other people. Do I need to tell them that that's what it is when I play it? That's another kind of political work. If I wanna then stand on a stage in London or in Lisbon or in, I don't know, in New York or in Los Angeles,
Minneapolis. Yeah.
Minneapolis, and say, "This is a piece that's dedicated to Rifat Al-Arir." Some people in the audience know who he is and others don't. And then if I then also say he was killed in Gaza in December of 2023, then it's like, okay, so he not only said that and felt that, but is putting himself on the line in a certain way
Mm. Yeah.
that then everyone has to deal with. So I have to make that choice beyond merely playing the song each time I play it, which is, do I want to put everyone else in this position I'm putting myself in so that we all become kind of implicated? That's a political question, right? So I guess what I'm saying is we can think not just about what a song does, but also of the political work that performance does in its moment.
Hmm.
That piece I recorded with Wadada Leo Smith, who's a black man who's from Mississippi, and he's 30 years older than I am. So he's 84. When we recorded it, you know, he was supportive of the idea and he sees that struggle as linked to the struggle of his own people.
Hmm.
In fact, on the same album, there's a piece that's dedicated to Patrice Lumumba, who was killed in the Congo in the late 50s. And that was also a targeted killing. So, you know, so there is this kind of idea of linked fates
Of course.
and linked histories, that this is all actually one story.
There's such a larger discourse that's out there, but I think it takes a fair amount of bravery and courage and fearlessness to, at the same time, not only just put it out there, but for others then to say, yes, I'm here to learn. I'm here to share that experience. And that's very appreciated in a way. When you think about your own background as someone who grew up as Indian American, someone who has shared and performed and collaborated with other Indian Americans, other South Asian Americans, other South Asians globally, and also putting it into the context of being a global citizen, how have those layers of your identity sort of shaped your sense of belonging? Or for that matter, even shaped this whole idea of using your art and your voice as a platform for that political discourse or that resistance, even within the jazz or music world?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for putting it that way. And it's partly that it has evolved and changed for me,
Hmm.
both in terms of what my position is in this complex world we're in, and
To say the least, right?
yeah, and also what these different affiliations might mean or how they might matter. For example, I don't, my parents left India in the early mid 60s, right? And my father was born before partition. He was born in the 33. So a good amount of his young life was spent in, I mean, under imperial rule, but in a broader, non-Hindu specific construction of India as a subcontinent, you know, not as this nation with borders. And so when people say India today, they mean something else than what he meant, you know? And that difference matters to me because my connection is more to the world, his world, than to like modern Hindu nationalist India, you know? Which is why I prefer to say South Asia and South Asian and South Asian American or South Asian
Sure.
diasporic
Sure.
instead of say Indian American. That is basically like, I didn't always think that way. I think in the 90s when I was coming of age and all of us were sort of like finding our way into this world in the West, like figuring out how to be who we are in the West, and particularly in North America, particularly in the US, that was not an obvious thing to do. There wasn't really a template for us, was that, and different people made different choices. But what happened to me is that in the early '90s, when I was in my when I was 20, essentially, I started playing with elder Black musicians, like people who were 50 years older than me. And through that world, that community, and being embraced by that community, and coming to understand their political reality and their social reality and the world as they experience it, the precarity, the lived precarity of the world as they experienced it. And that's humbling, first of all. And
Yeah.
to be, like, learning from people who hadn't been conferred any of the privileges that I had. I mean, where I was a PhD student at UC Berkeley, learning from people who hadn't gone to college or even finished high school, and some of whom had been in prison, and one of the ensembles I was in those years that was led by an elder drummer named E.W. Wainwright. Our main gigs were in the California state prison system. So most of what
Wow.
we did was to play at places like San Quentin, other places around California that were that, including the maximum security wards, where if you step over this line, a sniper up there will shoot you. Like, that's really
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Um, that was humbling also because I came to understand this, that a lot of the people in there had done nothing and were what, Wainwright called political prisoners. So then, like, what am I in relation to all of this? The construction person of color didn't really account for these differences in lived experience. I could say, well, I felt marginalized growing up brown in the suburbs, etc. And I was the first, Indian American jazz pianist, and so that made it hard to kind of define myself in but I wasn't up against this kind of stuff that I'm talking.
Mm. Sure.
Then apprenticing with, like, Amiri Baraka, the poet and activist, being in his band, and, being in, different groups with, where keeping my identity. But first of all, like, I was embraced because I had roots from outside the West, and that was,
Hmm.
like, something of interest. And I was invited to just be myself. I didn't have to, like, conform or something. And so being part of this, like, embrace, being allowed to be myself and trying to then figure out what that meant for myself,
Of course.
that became a lifelong pursuit. And then, like, well, what about finding people with whom I could find common cause?
Mm.
Being an artist of color in the West and in North America, that's something, like the fact that maybe I might have something in common with Teju Cole, for example, the Nigerian author, or that I might have something in common with Aruj Aftab, who's Pakistani American, or with Mr. Smith, whom I mentioned, who grew up in segregated Mississippi, or with Henry Threadgill, who grew up in Chicago in the aftermath of the Great Migration and was sort of like in a de facto segregated Northern American city. These different experiences where I'm finding that actually it's not simply about the sort of like facile notion of identity,
Mm.
but it's actually an endless set of possibilities about how we build community
Yeah.
and how we co-construct a future for ourselves and for each other, you know, through art making. So that's kind of how it's really played out over all these years, all these, like, pretty extraordinary encounters. Sometimes I feel like Forrest Gump of jazz.
Many dots to connect. And let me get you out of here on this. Given all of that, right? Given this global citizenship, this tapestry of experiences within the North American framework that you just mentioned, does your music help you and you, for instance, because it is an experience of one in the end, but does your music help claim or create a sense of home for you in that sort of context of identity and global citizenship?
It does. It is that sense of continuity. Sometimes people say to me, like, why do you do all these different things? And actually, to me, it's all the same thing. So the fact that I'm in this band one day and another band the next day, it feels like the same process to me. And I'm doing the same stuff in all of it, you know? So it's maybe the ingredients are different, but the methods and the human touch is the same. Whether that means global citizenship, I'm not sure about that phrase either. So I'm not sure what that means, honestly. It sort of implies a kind of carte blanche. And I would say that it's not that simple because I think of this phrase from Saidiya Hartman, which is that community is not a given, it's an achievement. So it needs to be made, it needs to be earned, it needs to be built. It takes work, it takes labor, it takes sometimes conflict, it takes, sometimes failure and rejection. And you don't experience pure mobility and pure freedom and pure agency. Like sometimes things are hard. You
Yeah.
got to work through that. So I think global citizenship speaks of a certain kind of privilege, and I'm not sure that that's simple.
Maybe I like the phrase, the framework of community and working at that. But I guess what I was trying to think about was, does it offer sanctuary? Does it offer home
Yeah,
for
I mean, I
people?
will say that that is what I feel that music does. Is it offers a space to join in feeling and space to kind of tap in to some other level of reality. Maybe that's kind of one that's protective or one that accesses a different layer of experience that you're not generally allowed to access. So it is this special place. I think of that, there's a gatha from, Thich Nhat Hanh's practice where he says, "I have arrived, I am home in the here and the now." And that sensibility that actually what music does is it brings you directly into the present moment in a way that, then we become accountable to one another in a different way, in a way that's vibrant and interdependent, very alive.
Well, building community, working at it hard, staying accountable, and feeling vibrant and alive. I think they're all at least personal descriptors of how I experience your music. Vijay, thank you so much for sharing some time with us, and I hope we can catch up with you again in the future.
For sure. Thank you, man. Thanks so much for making time.
Thanks so much again, Vijay, and thanks to all of you for listening and subscribing and sharing this with your family and friends. A big shout out this week to Godi for turning 40, to the Artemis crew and Amit Kshatriya for a mission accomplished and job well done, and to the artist Naresh Kumar Kumawat for his sculpted statue of Swami Vivekananda being unveiled in Seattle. Lastly, our collective hearts will always be filled with the songs and music of Asha Bhosle. Remember, everyone, be safe, be smart, and be kind. Till next time, I'm Abhay Darnikar.